Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining me on Monday night, the 13th of September. I'm going to be reading a couple of excerpts from the third Walkerville Desires series called Renewal. And the reason why I picked this is last week I spent some time talking about my profound experience with the Winged Victory at the Louvre in 1995. And how it has affected my writing. It was a big piece, it's sort of like an underlying piece of the first book, Return. And I was thinking about this third book, and it shows up here too. So I'm going to read this. The overnight delivery premises were in an old tannery where several businesses shared space, including a florist shop. Once inside the unique store, Trevor felt he'd entered a tropical dream. The atmosphere was a rich miasma of scents and colors, and he could hear the soft flow of water emanating from several antique fountains covered in fine layers of lush green moss. He was immediately drawn to the display on the bistro table. A 12-inch figure of a woman dramatically surfaced from a shallow onyx vessel. Her long, lean body was fashioned out of a pale juniper branch. Her body was elegantly tilting forward, emulating the yearning of a woman in love. Her magnificent crown of wild hair billowed behind, formed by the dark needles of the juniper bush. He blinked, realizing she was a bonsai cultivated in this extraordinary way, and he knew immediately this was for Ruth. Ruth left the front door of her water tower open for Trevor as she prepared dinner. She decided on simplicity: a small wedge of brie with crackers for starters, roasted chicken breasts, tiny red potatoes, salad, wine with brownies, and coffee for dessert. She had all the windows open. Using her oven meant the whole house heated up unbearably. Parking his Volvo next to her old Toyota, he could smell chicken and brownies. His stomach growled and remembered he hadn't eaten since breakfast. Carefully transporting the bonsai from his car to her house, he nudged the car door closed with his hip. He loved the idea of her living in a water tower. It was whitewashed with some eucalyptus and pine trees in a semicircle to the left of it. Someone had planted daffodils near the front door, and there were several bushes of plants that were unknown to him, growing up wrought iron trellises. The area looked like a page out of a children's book. He could imagine unicorns with wreaths of bells carrying dozens of gossamer winged fairies. Knock, knock, he announced himself, walking into the deliciously smelling kitchen. From another floor, he heard an old CD of Van Morrison singing Tupelo Honey. And just then she came flying down the stairs. She looked perfect. Short blonde hair, sporting several purple streaks held loosely by a red butterfly barrette. Her top was a lacy see-through. A flouncy cotton skirt was tiered in various colors, and she was barefoot, her toenails painted a teal green. She jumped the last two spiral steps and landed near him, who was still standing, awkwardly holding the precious gift. Her whole face crinkled into a perfect smile. Everything about her smiled. Her mouth, her cheeks, her eyes, her eyebrows. "Oh my God, is this for me? It's so beautiful, thank you." Taking the gift, she placed it in the middle of her round oak table. Hands at her hips, she walked around, taking in every detail of the gift. She shyly looked at him, tears shining in her blue eyes. "Wow," she whispered. "This is unreal. She looks alive." He walked to her, nodding. "She reminded me of you." She blushed, and then she was smiling again, ushering him to the table. He sat carefully. She sat next to him, still smiling. She pushed a vintage plate with faded yellow roses, which held a wedge of cheese and crackers. He carefully cut some cheese, stuffing a piece into his mouth, chewing slowly, not taking his eyes off of her. She gently touched the bonsai sitting in the center of the lavender tie-dye tablecloth. She loved that he said it reminded him of her. She reached for the cheese knife, cut a small piece. She held it to his mouth. With his eyes closed, he ate the offering. Clearly, he was smitten. So that's their Ruth and Trevor, the protagonist of this third book. Their first date. She lives in a water tower, a converted water tower. Wednesday, I'm going to talk more about Ruth and how she showed up to me and presented herself to me and blah, 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 blah. But this next piece, this second reading, is, you know, life goes on in Walkerville, and the job that brought Trevor to Walkerville is at an end, and Trevor doesn't know what to do, you know. Ruth's life in Walkerville is pretty perfect, and he doesn't feel good about whatever, right, because of his ghosts. Now Trevor was at a crossroads. What did the end of a project mean for him? When he first came to Walkerville, it was only temporary. He had no idea he'd fall in love. What would happen to the relationship with Ruth? He felt that she was his only tie to the community, and she was a new, what? Relationship? Girlfriend? Lover? Acquaintance? Friend? Things had been so easy with her. They went from strangers to lovers in a nanosecond. The instant connection went beyond the physical. She completed him, and he had not known he needed to be completed. She was determined. She was smart. She had a plan. She had her own business. She owned her own home. He loved their day-by-day life. They talked about everything, and they could talk about nothing, each comfortable in their silences. Shying away from relationships, possibly because of his maladjusted childhood, Trevor didn't realize how lonely and solitary his life had been. What did he want? What could he do? What did success look like to him? With a PhD in agricultural sciences, what were his options? Teaching? Consulting? Research? The Montroses were his fourth consulting venture. His first consultation was one he did out of love and compassion, and he was not successful. Trevor remembered that miserable rainy night, his PhD just completed, when his father drunkenly called. Big Bill Collins was devastated. Despite Trevor's recommendations, Big Bill had decided against rotating and resting almost 45 acres of old and tired walnut trees. He stubbornly and proudly insisted there was nothing wrong with the aging trees. With an exceptionally wet winter turning into a wet spring, irreparable damage ravaged those acres. When Trevor heard the anguish and powerlessness in his father's voice that night, he knew what the outcome would be. His father tried to tell Trevor that he loved him and found it difficult to say the words. He only managed to tell his son that he was proud of him and to forgive him for being such an old fool. Gone was the edge of anger and sarcasm that always laced his father's tone. His voice was monotone, crushed. Since then, Trevor had kept his head down, keeping busy, saying yes to everything people asked of him. From professors asking him to take on classes in the ag department, to PhD candidates asking him to be their thesis advisor, to consulting leads like the one that brought him to Walkerville, to Ruth. With Ruth, he was able to rest, to pay attention to his world, to enjoy the moment. Ruth was a great teacher in being in the moment. She loved being alive. She loved everything life had to offer, and she got up each morning wondering what her day would bring. It never occurred to Trevor that someone who had never had a disappointment or experienced any sort of loss might find it easier to wake up each morning with that kind of wonderment. That he compared his insides to what Ruth's world looked outside was an error. He felt that Ruth was living a charmed life. Everything she wanted, she achieved. Her well-being was because of her accomplishments. What would it be like to be Ruth with this type of track record? How could he expose her to his uncertain life when her life was so planned? He couldn't uproot her in the way his mother had been uprooted by his father, taking her away from her studies, her future. That's what Ruth had, a future that didn't include a permanent relationship with him. He packed his meager possessions in his backpack, his equipment already in the trunk of his car. He tidied his room in the hall, then drove up to the Montrose home for the last time, returning the key to Martha Janine. She was gracious and thanked him for his work and his recommendations. I just lost myself. She told him that he had been helpful in their decision to move ahead with planting berries. Martha Janine's farewell included this: Trevor, I'm thinking there's some unfinished business here, and maybe it's none of my business. I just want you to know that you're welcome back here any time, and if you need a place to stay, there's always the hall for you. It was almost midnight, and he was just outside Ashland, Oregon, when he remembered to phone Ruth. He didn't realize it was so late. Sleepily, she picked up her phone. Trevor, where are you? I thought you were coming by tonight. A car horn blared behind him as he failed to notice that the light had changed. Are you driving? She asked, fully awake now. Yeah, I'm on my way to see my mom. I finished a project with the Montroses. I'm at loose ends. I'm not sure what to do with myself, he faltered. He rolled down his window for fresh air, and he wondered if he needed a cup of coffee. He could hear the panic in her voice. But why didn't you come here? Why did you leave? Am I a loose end for you, Trevor? He tried to find words to reassure her. Looking over his shoulder, then glancing at his rearview mirror, he detected something wrong with the vehicle behind him. It seemed to be moving too fast. Gotta go. I'll call you back. And the line went dead. So you have to read the book to find out what happened. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I'll be back Wednesday and Friday of this week. And Wednesday, like I said earlier, I'll talk a little bit about how Ruth made herself known to me. And maybe Trevor, but mainly Ruth. So again, thank you for joining me. And remember to check below this video, this YouTube, because YouTube counts everything. So it means a lot to us if you give us a thumbs up. And it's really helpful if you subscribe to my channel by clicking that big red button. And if you have questions or comments, there are links to my Facebook and Instagram and my email addresses. And remember, AC is archiving all of these. Check the playlist on my page. Plus, the direct link for Wednesday night's live stream is there too. I hope to see you then. Good night, and see you Wednesday at 11. Bye-bye.